Hi there, and welcome to the PALS podcast mini-series, where we will be chatting to the different student services on offer at QMU. I'm Megan, and a fourth-year business management student and a PALS leader at QMU. Today, I'm here with Louise from the Wellbeing Service. Hi, Louise.
Hi, Megan. Thanks for inviting me. It's lovely to be here.
Oh, it's good to have you. In this podcast, we will talk about how students can contact the Wellbeing Service and generally how the Wellbeing Service can support students. So I think, first of all, Louise, it might be good to explain the different types of difficulties that students may have that the Wellbeing Service can support them with.
Absolutely. And this, there's many reasons that students might feel a need to access additional support from the Wellbeing Service. And this might occur at any stage of their university experience as well. But certainly, we've had a very unusual, challenging past year and a half for our students. So it's not been without challenges, induced by COVID. And that will still exist, in our lives. So, that's a factor that we can't ignore. But for a lot of students, when they start university, they're moving away from their support network of family and friends. And it can be a big adjustment into university life with the pressures around their studying schedule and academic work, but also socially fitting in, finding new friendship groups, managing a new routine and structure to their lives, but also kind of looking after themselves as well. The sort of basic self-care of sort of sleep and good nutrition, exercise can be hard to juggle when you're feeling quite overwhelmed with your lecture schedule and coursework, etc. And students might present with additional difficulties, maybe around loneliness and isolation and struggling to integrate and socialize. And for our international students, it can be difficult around the cultural change as well as language difficulties. There might also be personal events that are going on in a student's life, which they might want to come and talk about and share, as well as pre-existing mental health diagnosis and or difficulties that occur whilst the students at university around their mental health, and then maybe bereavements or relationship and friendship and family difficulties ongoing in a person's life. And that's just a few reasons, that there's many causes, that a student might feel that they're struggling and feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah, so that's really anything really that can be impacting students' well-being, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
So how do students get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I would first suggest for students to visit the Wellbeing webpage on our QMU site, and that's got lots of information about accessing the service. But it's quite easy for students to remember. They can also just directly email the Wellbeing Service, and that's the wellbeing@qmu.ac.uk. So and they can email, they can share information in the email, or they can choose not to. The email is a confidential email and comes directly to me. There's also a self-referral form available to the Wellbeing Service, which is on Student Central. So students can fill that and ask for some information, and that gets sent again directly to me. And for some students, it may come about that they're discussing with their PAT, their personal academic tutor, or another staff member, or someone in accommodation, who might say, "Oh, have you thought about accessing the Wellbeing Service for support?" So, it may come that way as well. Or if the student feels, that they're unable to reach out themselves, then that staff member can do so on their behalf as well.
Yeah, so that's good. It seems like there's many ways to get in touch with the Wellbeing Service.
Yeah.
And so once students get in touch with you, what does a typical session with the wellbeing advisor look like?
Yes, so I would reach out to that student and respond to their contact and just offer to meet with them. And this can happen, and this, obviously through COVID, we've been offering online appointments via Teams, but we have been continuing to offer face-to-face appointments on campus through COVID as well. And we'll continue with that choice and preference throughout the next academic year. So students can let me know which format they would prefer. And then I would hopefully it'll be a sort of quick response to their contact as well. In busy times, unfortunately, it is realistic that sometimes there might be a short wait to meet with me because it is a single service and under a lot of pressure. So, but hopefully I would be able to offer to meet with the student really quickly as well. And appointments last for up to 45 minutes. Through the appointment, we would just discuss what the students' concerns are and difficulties they might be having. And this doesn't just relate to, their academic work, that might be affected, but, whatever is going on in their lives are impacting on their mental health and well-being, they can share with me. And we would then discuss what, they would like to focus on, what their priorities are, and, I would help facilitate some solutions, additional support if needed, as well as I've got really good resources to share with students as well. And we'd look at just tools and strategies and how we sort of move forwards. And hopefully they start feeling a lot more positive and able to cope. And I'm able to offer, appointments, consecutive appointments, as and when needed as well, Megan. So, yeah.
So specifically, the Wellbeing Service offer stay on course support, don't they?
Yes, so that's a sort of an additional thread to the Wellbeing Service. And I like to sort of view that any reason that a student might be accessing the Wellbeing Service probably incorporates an element of stay on course where it might be affecting or impacting on their ability to engage with their coursework or their attendance or manage their academic workload. But stay on course is particularly just another way into the Wellbeing Service, but it could be flagged up that the student is struggling with their attendance or meeting deadlines and managing assessments, or and it's sort of a quick response to support the student with trying to keep them on track and maintain their engagement with their course, and offer them additional support to do that as well, for as long as is needed. And I think around that too, sometimes students like to come if they're having any doubts around their course too, where they might be feeling, I'm not sure if this is right for me. And it's a safe space to talk that through and then think about, what that means for them and what their options might be. And that's where I might link into other student support services like the Careers and Employability team.
Yeah, so it seems like there's a lot of support that the Wellbeing Service can offer and resources that they can give to students. So I can also imagine that for some students, sharing their personal information might be quite daunting, especially if they're maybe concerned about how this information could be used or shared. So what's the confidentiality policy when students book a session?
Yeah, and it is important, I think, to acknowledge that, because we wouldn't want students to hold back from accessing support because of that fear. we have an information sharing agreement that all students should be aware of, and it is available for students to look at, and that's on Student Central, but it's also on my Wellbeing webpage. And it very clearly defines around the reasons why we might look at disclosing to other key members of staff, and that's specifically around risk concerns, you know, around a risk concern about the student or somebody else, and safeguarding and welfare. But generally, you know, there's no reason to break confidentiality, and certainly with students that access my support, we always discuss if we think it would be beneficial to share with a particular member of staff who we might want to share information with and how much information we want to share. And this would be particularly a discussion we might have when it's linking into their academic work or their programme, if they're having particular struggles, that we might discuss disclosing a certain amount of information that may help them feel more supported. And also for situations around EC applications, you know, and providing evidence for those applications. So it's always a discussion I would have with a student and obtain their consent as well, and their agreement that yes, this would be a good idea to share a certain amount of information with somebody. Does that answer your question, Megan?
Yeah, definitely. So hopefully, if any student is listening and that was maybe a barrier for them getting in touch, hopefully that's put their mind at ease.
Yeah, and they can clearly read our confidentiality agreement so that they feel familiar with it and the reasons why, but also hopefully to reassure them.
Yeah. So I'm just going to read a couple of the testimonials from students that have contacted the Wellbeing Service. I just think it shows how excellent the service is and should hopefully encourage students to take advantage of the service if they do have any concerns during their time at university. So a student has said, "The Wellbeing Service has been vital to me in the past few days. I would advise anyone needing guidance and someone to talk to access the service." Another student said, "The Wellbeing Service is extremely helpful. I already feel less stressed, anxious, and overwhelmed since meeting with the advisor and accessing support." So those really speak for themselves, don't they, Louise?
Yes, they do. And I always feel really touched when students leave such, you know, positive feedback where they really have felt, you know, in their moments of need, that they have felt listened to and supported. And I think, you know, we always, any student that accesses the Wellbeing Service too, we ask them to leave their anonymous feedback, you know, because it is important. It's a student-led responsive service, so it is important that our students feel that they're getting what they need when they need it, and also an opportunity to feedback around the service too. And I think other feedback that comes through quite consistently is students sharing that they wish they'd reached out sooner. And I think that would be something I would emphasize again, you know, back to some of the points we've discussed, Megan, that, you know, if any students sort of hesitating, you know, it's just even reading some of these testimonials and just encouraging themselves to reach out, not to be scared or worried about that process, and hopefully they'll be relieved that they did.
Yeah, no, it is really encouraging to hear. Now, just to wrap up, Louise, we have been asking some of the other student services in this podcast this question, and the question is, if a student listening wanted to reach out to the Wellbeing Service and they're really relating to what we're talking about today, but is maybe a bit anxious to do so, what advice would you give them now?
Well, for any student listening, I would remind them that we are, I'm available all year round. So no matter their worry or concern, and I hope they feel also reassured that nothing is too big, too small. Because again, sometimes students will say, I felt there might be other students who deserved support before me, or they didn't want to take someone else's space. So I would reassure and remind them that I am here for them to listen and talk through whatever their concerns are, and not to be scared about that, but also it might be helpful for them to know that there are different formats available. So if they felt worried about coming onto campus or a face-to-face session, that we could meet online using Teams. But also it might be useful for them to even go onto the Wellbeing webpage. I've done a short Panopto video of Meet the Wellbeing Advisor, and even for them to watch that, and that might help them feel a little bit more at ease that they've almost met me virtually. And hopefully that would help reduce some of their fears and anxieties too. And also maybe to read some more of the testimonials that other students have left, and that might encourage them again to reach out and access support.
Well, I think you've done a great job of explaining the Wellbeing Service and what the service has to offer, Louise. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Megan.
So remember, if you would like to book an appointment with the Wellbeing Service, to complete the self-referral form on the Wellbeing Service page on the QMU website, or email wellbeing@qmu.ac.uk. You can also follow PALS QMU on Instagram to listen to our other podcasts and our student service mini-series, where we chat to the disability, student funding, counselling, the effective learning service, and the careers and employability service.